Well, what's up, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, preppers, non-preppers, homesteaders, rebel canners? To our live. We're live. It's Paris and Scott with Prepper Talk Radio. Hope you guys are tuning in. We're gonna have a special guest joining us soon, Jordan Gundersen, who's an herbalist, and we've just spent the last hour with him, and it's been phenomenal.
Oh yeah. Great information. I got a half a page of notes just from the last one, so I'm excited about how many notes I'm going to get on this one as soon as we get them back in.
Yeah. So hey, everybody, make sure you're sharing this live feed to your communities. Let them know that we're live. Let them know if they have questions on herbalism to get over here, because we're gonna have a lot of questions answered. Jordan is just about in. There he is. Jordan, welcome to the live stream. I'm just telling everybody to go share this so they can get all their friends here live and ask questions direct.
Perfect.
To get as much engagement for you and make this as beneficial as possible. In our last episode, for those of you guys who didn't get to hear or watch that yet, Jordan and we talked about Jordan about a couple different things. Like he had kind of forced by God into the field of herbalism, and both he and his wife have been able to see some fantastic results from just using some simple things, like the benefits of cayenne, the benefits of garlic. I mean, just it's something most of us completely have no clue about, and it's because we're programmed. We'll use television terms. Programmed. Our programming is pointing us to a different direction, where people can make a lot of money instead of to the earth that can do a lot of healing, and all the things that God's created for us. Right. And it's fantastic because there's so much we don't understand about plants and what plants can do for us, that Jordan, you've studied so much that you know a lot, and you've got a huge network of resources to go to find out more. But I want to jump in, right? Like, I just really want to jump in. Tell us about the time you had COVID and what you used.
Okay, that's a great story to start with. So I finished my school actually in 2021. I went to school right after I broke my toe in 2020. And when I finally made that decision, it felt like God pressed on my mind, like, you need to get this done as fast as possible. And I was going, okay, yeah, I can do that. So I went through the School of Natural Healing's Herbalist program. It's like about a 3-year program. I did it in about 7 months. And I was one of the fastest they've ever had do it. And I had no idea why I needed to get it done so fast. I didn't have a clue. And then in August of 2021, I got sick really bad. I had the body aches, the chills, the fever, the cough, the horrible cough, just like right in the chest, and headache. It was the works. And at first I was like, this is great. I'm an herbalist now. I have all this knowledge. I know exactly what to do. This is great. And it was another one of those times God was just kind of pushing me to see if I could step up to the challenge.
That's awesome.
And so I did all my school's protocols. I was following what, they had talked about and what we should do, and nothing was working. I sat a whole day with a clove of raw garlic in my mouth, just like sucking on it throughout the day. And that was supposed to be like the ultimate, you can do that, this will get rid of anything. Didn't even touch it.
Wow.
I was trying all the kinds of herbs for my lungs. I was doing mullein. I was doing comfrey. I was doing echinacea. I was doing all these antiviral herbs, and none of them were working. And I was losing my mind. Meanwhile, my parents were also sick, and I had been taking care of them for a week, and they weren't getting any better either. And my mom had mentioned to me that one of their neighbors had used Ivermectin, and he got better in like 3 or 5 days. And I thought, okay, well, you need to stop relying on me for your health because what I'm telling you to do isn't working. And so I said, I think you should go get ivermectin. Find somewhere where you can get it, because at the time, like, that was when it was starting to get used widely, but they weren't giving it out super well. So I told my parents, go get some, find somebody who can get you some. I don't know what else to do. And it was at that point, it was like a light bulb went off in my mind. And I thought, well, maybe ivermectin is a drug that's used for parasites. And then I remembered when President Trump got COVID, he said that he used hydroxychloroquine, which is, again, used for parasites. And so I thought, well, maybe this whole COVID thing isn't what we think it is. It was my conspiracy brain going off and thinking all this crazy stuff.
Feel free to put your tinfoil hat on. We love tinfoil hats on this channel.
All right. And I thought, maybe this isn't a virus. Maybe this is a parasite or some kind of bioengineered parasitic entity. I don't know. And so I started doing some research, and I found that wormwood, cloves, and black walnut, when combined, are very powerful against parasites. And I thought, well, if I'm going to reverse engineer something like ivermectin, I want it to be strong. So those are what I'm going to use. And then I thought, okay, but what if it doesn't work? What if there's something else that it needs? And so I got down on my knees and I said one of the most earnest prayers I've ever said in my life. And I said, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I need. So let me know if there's anything else I need to put in here. And as soon as I ended that prayer, I knew exactly what herbs to use. I knew exactly how much of each herb to use. And then I knew exactly how much I should take. I don't get things like that all the time. So I'm not like some kind of prophetic person, but that moment was very, very distinctive for me. And my wife was out of town. She was speaking, and I called her up and I was like, Cassidy, I know exactly what to do. I know what to do. And she was like, okay, great. And so I went and got my herbs and I made it and I started taking it and I got better in 2 days.
Wow.
My parents started taking ivermectin at the same time and they didn't get better for a week. And even after that week, they still had some headaches. They had stomach pains from using that medication. And so it was really interesting to see. There was like a side by side, and my wife and I were like, well, what do we call this? And she was like, oh, let's call it Herbalmectin. And I was like, oh, that's funny. And we started, telling people about our experience. And then it just kind of exploded. We never meant for it to be called Herbalmectin, but that's kind of what people started calling it. So we call it HMCTN instead of Herbalmectin, because that's a trademarked name, Ivermectin. So we don't want to steal that. But we've seen kind of a similar story with other people who've used it as well. 2 days seems to be the case. And the other herbs that were included when I got that list of ingredients were chaparral, burdock, lobelia, and golden seal. And I have tried with that formula. I've removed things to try and see if it still works, and it doesn't. I've had people who were allergic to black walnut, particularly in my own family. And so I tried to make an alternative version for them, and it doesn't work as well. I mean, it does to some degree, but not as well. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm not going to play with this anymore. I'm going to let it be how it is, because I can't claim total ownership over that. So that's kind of how that all came about. I wrote an article about it in Dr. Christopher's newsletter and about my experience. And the next morning after that newsletter went out, I think it went out early in the morning, like at 5 a.m. When I woke up, I had 200 emails in my inbox from people all over the world saying, hey, what is this stuff? How do I make it? How do I get it? What can I do? Because that was like the height of the Delta variant. And so a lot of people were in dire straits like I was.
Yeah.
And then they started reporting to me the similar experiences. And it was kind of weird because this was a very parasitic specific formula that I had given to me. And what's interesting about Chaparral is it's used a lot of times to chelate heavy metals from the body. It's really kind of a chelating herb. So it helps to pull things out, kind of like plantain, like we talked about on the last episode. But this Chaparral, I've tried using this formula without the Chaparral, and it doesn't work as well. So to put on that tinfoil hat again, I personally believe that there's some kind of bioengineered metallic entity to this COVID stuff. And I didn't even get COVID. I didn't even get that sickness. I don't know if it was COVID or not until I was around somebody who'd just gotten the juice. So, I can't say one way or the other, but that's kind of what it seemed like to me.
Wow.
So speaking of the jab and the arm, well, let's ask this question here. Backroads brings up a good question. People need to be careful using cloves. Many are allergic to them and don't even know it. Is there something that you can speak to about that to help out those that might be allergic?
Yeah, there's many different varieties of cloves. So it kind of depends on which variety, also where you're getting them from, because poor quality cloves, like the ones that you get just as like a culinary herb, those are really low quality. Really any kind of spice or herb that you get as like a culinary herb, they're usually pretty low quality and have a lot of harmful things in them. So my recommendation is whenever possible, get really high quality. But for people who are specifically allergic to cloves, I've never had an interaction with somebody who's specifically allergic to cloves, but of course there are people out there. In my experience, people are usually allergic to black walnut with nut allergies. That's usually the more common one, but I've never seen the clove.
So where does somebody go to get these higher quality herbs?
There is a place online called Herbco. They do a lot of culinary herbs. They have some quality herbs there. But if you want like the medicinal herbs that we've been talking about, Star West Botanicals is probably up there at the top, in my opinion. There are some from Herbco. I think it's Monterey Bay Herb Company is their full name. Their website is herbco.com. And then Mountain Rose Herbs is another good one. They have some pretty good quality herbs there as well.
Do you sell any of these things, these mixtures?
Yeah.
On your website?
Yeah, so we've got that, the HMCTN. We also have a line of herbs that I created called Bless My Herbs. And the idea is that sometimes there are places in our body that kind of give us some grief, or we feel like give us some grief. And so the idea with these Bless My Herbs is to bring blessings to those areas rather than cursing ourselves like, oh, my darn liver, I have all these liver problems. Instead, do something different about it. Use herbs and your own words to help support your body. So for me specifically, I mentioned in the last episode that I've got liver challenges. I've been using my own liver formula called Bless My Liver. And so I use that to help with some of my liver challenges that I've been clearing up over the last little bit.
And so this is your website here, healthsaves.org, O-R-G.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what people are saying about HMCTN, which is what you call the herbal, or what we coined the Herbalmectin.
Yeah.
Natural guide to COVID. This is excellent. Newsletters. So it sounds like you've got a plethora of resources here on your website. webinars even that you offer. And
Yeah.
so if somebody wants to, use your services, they can just come here where it says services, and then you have you have a bunch of consultations, nutrition coaching, education, and other things like that. Is that the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, that's the best way.
That's awesome. So I was going to ask about, you mentioned the metal bits and pieces what was the herb that does it?
Chaparral.
Chaparral takes out.
Yeah.
Now I've seen some of these blood studies after people have gotten the what in their shoulder, the juice, so to speak. And there's a lot of those metallic, shiny. There's people reporting that do blood work, reporting like octopus, squid looking things and like shiny metallic looking things.
Yeah.
Have you had anybody maybe with an adverse reaction to any of these come to you that you've worked with to help kind of cleanse or purify, or I don't know if they can eliminate or eradicate completely, but have you had anybody come to you with any adverse reactions or things like that you've been able to help?
Yes. So the hard thing with it is a lot of the people who chose to get the jab, they don't see a lot of their health problems now as being linked to what choice they made for their health, which is kind of difficult. So I do have people coming to me all the time saying like, oh, what kind of herb could I use for this health problem that I only got recently that's not affiliated with any kind of injection that I may or may not have had. So that's a hard thing. Because sometimes I just don't have the heart to tell them, and I'm not their doctor, so that's their job. But I have had several people specifically who know that they had an adverse reaction who've come to me and said, "Help me. What do I do?" And I don't tell them, this is going to fix your problems, but if I were in your shoes, this is what I would do. There was a woman who had. She started having heart palpitations. She started having her heart rate drop really, really low at night. And she came to me and she'd heard about, my story, and she started using HMCTN. And within 2 weeks, she came back to me and she showed me her Apple Watch data showing her heartbeat. She told me that she didn't have any more heart palpitations, and she showed me that her heartbeat was in a normal range at night where it had not been previously.
Interesting.
So that was with some data to back it up. I mean, it's not like scientific, it's anecdotal, but that was really interesting. I had a family member who had an adverse reaction and had to have an inhaler. They had to start using an inhaler because they had some lung problems. And she started using the HMCTN, and then a couple weeks later, she hasn't had to use the inhaler ever again.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
And the thing is,
the big takeaway, or the big key is like, there's more options than what people think. Right. And if you look at your whole body holistically, some people are going to hear this podcast and are like, I'm not interested in bounce. Some people are going to listen to this and go, yeah, okay, and not do anything. Some people are going to listen to this and go, okay, I have questions. Right. But I think as we look, I don't know, I'm kind of starting my way down this journey, and the reason I'm moving towards this is because I've had problems with other medications, and I've had injuries from work, and they're like, oh, you just need to take this every day. I'm like, yeah, not for me. I don't want to take these like weird chemicals every day because they don't feel better. I feel less pain, or I feel less of the problem, but the problem doesn't get fixed. Whereas if I've done better nutrients, those problems have seemed to go away. And so that's why I'm really eager to have this conversation and talk about it. But again, it's not for all audiences.
Sure.
Well, Utah Mike, hey, appreciate you being in here. Thank you, Backroads, and you guys that are listening in and asking questions. You guys are fantastic, and thank you for that. But for the people who want more information specifically on this, stick around, pay attention. Feel free to reach out and ask questions. And that's really, we're not pushing anything. We're just trying to help people understand there are other options. And from a religious perspective, God created our bodies. Who better to figure out how to fix what's going on in our bodies than to go to God? And he gave us the whole world. Everything that he created was created for the benefit and use of man. And we need to be thankful and rejoicing in those things. I think that's where we lose a lot of people, especially in today's age, is people just don't have that level of gratitude for all these things because they've forgotten who gave it to them, who's created all this. And so I love this. I mean, there's so much that I don't know. I'm the first person to tell people, dude, I don't know a lot about a lot, right? There's very few things that I'm like, oh yeah, I got that. But this is one of those areas where I just don't know much.
I think it's good too, because we're talking about, with Jase Medical, that's one of the things we're offering for our, once we had 1,000 subscribers, raffle for contest to give away a Jase Medical supply. And, I finished the book 1 second after this weekend. And one of the big problems in that book was first food. And then second was medicines, having the appropriate medicines to be able to take care of people. And, if a pharmacy goes down, or if the industrial complex goes down, and you can't have this pharmaceutical grade stuff come at you with what they're creating and making in nature, there's going to be a lot of these things that we can go and find and use. And if the grid goes down, and in fact, what's cool about the book that I read, at the end of the book, one of the generals says is, a military general says, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this EMP potential could happen. And so if everything goes down, we lose everything.
Yeah.
Imagine having no pharmaceuticals when you need them. And that's all you've ever relied on. That's all you ever knew, not knowing that if you had just learned about a few of these herbs that are probably in your backyard, and for sure that are just up in the foothills, not too far away or too far a walk for most people, you could probably go up there and pick a few things, mash a bunch of things together, and then bring it all together and get the same result, if not a better result, than what some of these drugs and medicines were doing. Is that fair to say, Jordan?
Yeah, I think to your point that we've become so detached from nature. We're so addicted to our modern conveniences and our technology that we forget that we're part of nature too.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're organic material, and that's what God created, is the organic world. And man has created this inorganic world that we've kind of surrounded ourselves with. And so my message to people is really, hey, let's try and get back to learn some of those things, learn about the world that God has placed us in. You look at indigenous cultures that lived on this land before we did, and their medicine men could tell you every use for every plant that you find out in nature. And how many of us today even know just a handful of medicinal uses of the plants that are right around our house?
Do you have like recommendations on, like, because we all can't just go to school for this,
right?
But books, are there specific books that you would recommend people start with? One of the ones I've got on my list to get is the book of Lost Book of Herbal Remedies by Dr. Nicole Pellion, who we've had as a guest on here before. But I know you've got a library of things you've probably studied, and I know Backroads is in the chat, and he's provided a lot of good content. Please post if you've got a book that you recommend in there as well, Backroads, for anyone that's listening now, but also anyone that hops in later, on understanding, natural remedies that you can find out hiking, right?
Yeah.
And how to make them. Like, what would you recommend, Jordan?
Ones that you find hiking, you'll probably, one of the good identification books is Peterson's Field Guide. And there's several different regions that they have of that. And that'll tell you which ones are toxic, which ones to avoid. And it'll also tell you how to identify what they look like. It has a lot of pictures as well. I've used that when I'm out in the mountains and I'm looking for something specific. And maybe I don't find what I'm looking for, but there are other plants and I go, hey, what is this? There are also apps that you can get that will, you take a picture of the plant and it'll pull up what kind of plant it is. So that's kind of an interesting use of our modern technology that we have. We can help identify some plants. Green Pharmacy by James Duke is like a really good basic book that kind of teaches you how to
green
use,
like the
Green Pharmacy.
the color green.
Yeah,
Pharmacy.
We talked about that on the last one.
Oh, nice.
Herbal Home Healthcare is another one that I think I mentioned. That one tells you more about like how to use the herbs, like in a tea, how to make a tea, how to make a decoction, which is basically a stronger form of tea, and then how to put things on externally as like a poultice or a fomentation. There's all different ways that you can use those herbs to your advantage.
And that's probably what you did with when you told the story about your toe being broken and you used comfrey. You made a poultice or something that you put on there externally.
So with that one, I had an ointment that I put on at night. And then I also made a poultice sometimes as well. But then during the day, I just soaked my whole foot in a strong decoction of the tea.
Oh, that's cool. Do you make the ointments too?
I've made a few just for my family. I don't have any that I sell to people. But yeah, I've made several for different purposes.
That's excellent.
That's awesome. I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, just start learning. Just start learning. I actually have a greens field guide, and so I'm like, hey, I forgot I have that. I need to start pulling that out and using it more often.
And that's a good way to get prepared too, is to go out in the mountains with your family and say, hey, let's identify some herbs that we can use medicinally. Yeah. That's a good family activity that I think anybody can do. The kids will love it. My kids love going up in the mountains and looking for herbs.
I got a almost 6-year-old. She'll be 6 in a couple of weeks, but and a 4-year-old. And I'm like, I need to get them outside more. And I'm like, I can't wait for the snow to melt a little bit. Yeah. And to start identifying these plants would be such a great way to go out and spend some time educating themselves while also getting a good education myself in what these things are and what you can do with them and collecting them as you go. Is there like any, I guess, negative of like, okay, we found some, let's collect some. Would it be best to just like dry it out or to store for a little while, or what would you recommend?
Yes, that's a great question. So whenever you're out in like the mountains or out in any kind of area where there's some herbs growing, you want to make sure that you don't gather close to the highway. You'll get a lot of sprays and fumes, exhaust, things like that. But generally speaking, you will want to dry them. You can dry them just by hanging them up. That's kind of the folk way to do it. Some people will use a dehydrator. That's a little more advanced. But really, if you keep them out of the sun and just let them dry, they'll be good to go. And then just store them either in like a glass jar or some kind of container where you can keep the air and the sun out. And they should stay good for several years.
Do you have like a storage in your house where if you have a bunch of these herbs like on hand?
Yeah, we've got bottles, we've got some bags, and we just kind of keep them in a safe place.
Cataloged. And when you go locally, are there local stores that are pretty good? Like I know here in Utah, there's a place called Good Earth. There's even a Trader Joe's in a lot of places around the world. Are those stores usually, do they have pretty good, decent, if somebody wants to go into a physical store, do they usually have good quality stuff?
Yeah, they usually have good stuff at Good Earth here in Utah. They also, in most other states, there's usually like a local herb shop in places. For Thanksgiving last year, my family went to Las Vegas and we were in a pinch. We had an emergency and we didn't have an herb. We brought our normal stuff with us, but we didn't have something that we needed. And so we went to a local herb shop that was open and picked something up, and we were good to go.
That's cool.
So yeah, most places will have something.
That's good to know.
Is there something, for example, let's say, I know we kind of talked a little bit about this in the last episode as well, but just kind of to repetition is the mother of learning, as they say. So let's say I'm a prepper and I want to have my food storage, and I got my 90-day supply, I got my medicines, got my herbs. I actually have a 90-day supply of ibuprofen. I have a 90-day supply of acetaminophen. So what would be some good 90-day supplies? I know Dr. Christopher for sure on Amazon. Whenever I order his stuff, I always try to order a couple bottles of stuff that I think would be good. Are there some things that you would recommend that are like general herbs or general things that you would probably say these would be good to have in your food storage and have a good supply of them?
Yeah, for sure. Cayenne pepper, I think, would be one of the top ones. You want to have some cayenne on hand. That can be used for things like bleeding, headaches. It can be used for sinus issues. It really is good to help clear out mucus out of the body. That's a really good first aid herb.
Nice.
Most herbalists will tell you that's the top herb for first aid. Comfrey is another one we talked about earlier. Comfrey is really good for things like bruises, cuts, scrapes. I used it to heal a broken bone. So, Comfrey's up there on my list as well.
Could comfrey be used kind of like, not that you want to replace it with stitches, but could it be something that if you have a big enough cut, if you bandaged it properly and put comfrey there, do you think comfrey would help it to like act maybe as a natural stitches?
Yeah. So I've used it in such a way many times. One thing, if you look online, a lot of people will be like, "Oh, don't use comfrey because that may heal over the top skin before the underlying skin if the cut's really bad." But that hasn't been the case when I've used it. And even if that is the case, if you keep putting comfrey over the area, it'll heal up all the skin underneath, whether it's on top or underneath.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ever getting comments that Melissa, oregano, turmeric, pepper, chamomile, thyme, marjoram, and then Paris, this one's for you. Get rid of the ibuprofen and acetaminophen.
Thanks, Backroads. Yeah.
Backroads, I love you, dude. That's awesome.
He just
as soon
tells
as you're
us,
like, yeah, I got my 90-day supply, I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, Backroads. He calls me on it. He keeps me honest. Thank you.
That's the best thing. Like having fantastic people who participate in our chats, they will call us on our shenanigans. They will help correct us. Like that's the cool thing about Prepper Talk Radio's entire audience. Like we're all helping each other. Like we'll bring on different topics. We'll bring on different speakers. We'll bring on different guests, and then we get tons and tons of amazing feedback from our audience, our listeners, everyone that's participating. But like Backwards, just threw another one out. Get willow.
Yes.
Willow bark and dry it. The inner part is
salicylic.
Salicylic. Thank you. Acid.
Salicylic acid.
So that's aspirin. So I grew up on willow bark. It's like every time. Oh, this is that. We'll get some willow bark and take some willow bark. And I'm like, oh my gosh, willow bark. There's a few things that like trigger youthful memories of triggering. It's like, why are we doing this? But they work.
Yeah. And it maybe better for this area, a little easier to get, is quaking aspen bark. Does kind of a similar thing, but the quaking aspen bark has some of that same medicinal quality to it, and it can be used in a similar way. So my wife, she's had headaches a lot, and whenever she gets a really bad headache, we use quaking aspen bark, and that seems to do the trick for her.
So tell me, I know that there's a really big push. I saw a joke the other day. It says, the snake oil salesman changed their techniques. They dropped the word snake and put in the word essential. And so how do and with all due respect, I have taken many essential oils that have had a profound natural healing effect. So I do believe that there's some significant benefits to having essential oils in your portfolio. What would you say? How do essential oils kind of compare to, or maybe synergistically work with, or contrast with herbs and the necessity for herbs? What would you say to that?
Sure, that's a great question. I get this question a lot, and it's usually by people who are selling essential oils, and so I have to be careful in my response. But I think I can give my full response here. For me personally, I don't like to use essential oils if I don't need to. The reason for that is that I want to use the whole plant of an herb. And when I say the whole plant, I mean all the compounds that are contained in the medicinal part of a plant. So, for example, peppermint. When I use peppermint, I want to use the whole plant rather than extracting the volatile oils that have medicinal properties and then putting them inside my body. Because, I think you mentioned early at the beginning, God is the all-wise creator who put all these things in such a way that we could use them on the earth. And who am I to say, hey, actually, I need this. This is the better thing in this plant. I want to extract it out and then use it in a concentrated form. So I try to use things in the whole plant. So for things like the volatile oils that are in peppermint, you can make a tea. And when you make the tea, you put the lid on, and it will keep all those volatile oils inside. And then once it cools down, you can drink it and you get the medicinal benefit. I will say, however, for things like essential oils, I think they're great for like aromatherapy and things like that. I've had some great success when, sinuses are really bad or just need to relax using something that's really good for the sinuses. And then something like lavender, like Backroads mentioned here. Lavender is great for helping to relax and just kind of calm your mind. So that's kind of how I would use essential oils. I don't like to ingest them necessarily, but for any other kind of use, yeah, I think they're great. Oh, they're good for cleaning too. I use them for cleaning.
Never used an essential oil for cleaning. That's interesting.
It's mostly
Then
just to
again,
make it smell good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I don't use essential oils very often anyway. So, yeah, I've got a lot to learn in a lot of different ways. And I apologize to everyone. I keep having to mute and cough. I'm getting over a cold here. The last thing to go is my lungs. So, with that congestion, is there something you'd recommend to me to help get that out quicker?
So there are herbs that we call expectorants,
Mm-hmm.
and expectorants help to expel mucus out of the body. So you'd want to probably try something that's expectorating. Lobelia is one of them, like we talked about before. Lobelia is great for the lungs. It's kind of historically been a specific for asthma, but also for any kind of mucus congestion. It will help to break it up. Marshmallow root is another one that's really good. I tend to have the most success with mullein. Mullein's a plant that grows around here. It grows in kind of rocky areas. It's very tall when it grows to maturity. But that's one that you can get. It's pretty common. Mullein's probably one of my top herbs for the lungs.
Okay.
Comfrey's another one. That's one that has a kind of an affinity for the lungs. Those would probably be my go-tos. And then HMCTN, that's my go-to whenever I get feeling something, but that's my own creation. I have a lot of experience with that.
Does that even work for the traditional viral flu or the viral cold?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of people that have. I mean, that's not what I intended it for when I made it, but a lot of people have used it for that and have had some great results. Backroads mentioned mullein tea is great for congestion. It very much is. One thing I was going to say with mullein is too, it's also kind of a sedative. It's like it's very mild sedative.
Mhm.
So if you're really under the weather and your kind of adrenals are just really shot, it's really good to kind of help put you at rest a little bit too.
Just, I want to show this one real quick. I've been wanting to say this too, but Backroads hit it right at the time. Do not harvest any urban populated city areas. The number one reason for that is you don't know what has been done to that surrounding area. Pesticides, car exhausts, um, animals peeing on it, right? There's a million different things that could be going on there. Number one, though, pesticides,
Yeah.
chemicals that shouldn't be around there. You don't want to
Roundup.
ingest those. Roundup, we have plants growing in my yard that I'm like, I can't use those. Don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know what my neighbors just sprayed over by that side of the house. Great. And so be very cautious. That's why it's always more important to learn these things. You go away from the city, away from town, away from population to find those things. They're going to be higher quality. You're not going to have to worry about the chemicals that your neighbor's spraying on his yard, so to speak.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another good point is that as I shared earlier, I finished that book 1 second after, which talks about an EMP going off over the United States and basically destroying the whole infrastructure, everything that is. It's a really good book, by the way. I highly recommend you read it. It'll open your eyes to some of the things that you might not be ready for or prepared for. And one of the things that there was a conversation in one of the chapters that talked about, what are we going to do about medicine? What are we going to do about foods? And they were trying to find some of the older citizens of this town that knew some of the older ways, the older things. And there was a conversation in the book where the the professor was talking to the main character in the book about how the library had some of these science books and nature books and magazines going back 30, 40, 50, 60 years that they would then say, look, we're going to have, because, when the power goes out, you don't spend your days watching Netflix, your power's out. What are you going to do with your life? Well, go read. And so
Yeah.
he would get these books and these magazines, and he would get these really good, great resources into the hands of the students that were stuck all day long doing nothing anyways. And they say, hey, go read these, go read about what to do. And then they would send like groups of people into the woods after having read all about it, and they would come back with basket loads of dandelions and other roots and all kinds of things that they could then cook and eat and have part of that, not only for their medicines but also for their food, to actually survive and actually have something to eat. And that to me, as I was one of the things as I was reading the book, I was thinking to myself, I'm excited to have Jordan on because he's going to share with us some of these things that are just growing. And we could actually, is it true, Jordan, you could actually, I know we've talked about don't harvest in the city, don't harvest next to highways, but you could actually grow an herb garden, right? And you can grow a lot of these things and have a safe place in your backyard or somewhere where you actually have safe herbs that are growing for you to use and then utilize. Do you have an herb garden too yourself, or tell us more about how to do that?
So yeah, that's a great way to have things on hand, is to grow your own. In most places, you can grow herbs. You may need to get a greenhouse if you're into that kind of thing. If you really want to go the extra mile and have a wide range of medicinal plants. Personally, I don't have an herb garden as of yet. That's one of our goals, is to start growing our own things. For now, we've just kind of accumulated our own store of herbs that I have this problem where I learn about an herb and then I have to go get it so I can use it and experiment with it and try different things. It's not really a problem, but
That's
maybe my wife will tell you it's a problem, but I don't think it's a problem.
I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem.
You've got a
I
problem.
can
I don't have a
quit
problem.
anytime, I promise.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Oh, that's funny. Speaking of that, is that, or is there things like for people who want to get in shape or want to lose weight, are there herbs that help for burning fat and maybe helping with cessation of smoking or some of these other addictions? Are there herbs that can help with that stuff too?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the nature of the issue. So if somebody has an issue with weight, kind of depends on what the cause is. A lot of people do have thyroid issues when they have,
Mhm.
unexplained weight gain. They can't lose weight no matter what they do. And so using herbs that will support the thyroid will help to alleviate some of that weight if that's the cause. Um, for things like just general weight loss, that's a little bit more tricky. Chickweed, generally speaking, and maybe even fenugreek. Those are two herbs that may help with appetite.
Mhm. I hear that, and yarrow too is one of the ones in a lot of these fat burning.
Yeah, yarrow stimulates the vagal nerve, and that's probably what it does to aid in weight loss, telling the brain, "Hey, it's time to be done." Um, so yeah, that could be a good one for weight
Like
loss as well.
inhibits your desire for munchies and some of these other things.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
For smoking, there is an interesting one. I already mentioned mullein, but mullein has been used by a lot of people who've wanted to quit smoking but can't. It provides that slightly narcotic effect, but it's not a narcotic, obviously. It's slightly sedative, and it will kind of calm somebody down. So if they're trying to quit smoking, instead smoke the mullein plant, and that's kind of a substitute for the tobacco and the nicotine. And then once they've done that enough, then they can just stop smoking altogether, and they don't go through those kind of withdrawals.
That's cool. So the bottom line is that God has created alternatives for almost all the stuff that man has decided to see if we're better at than God somehow. But he's got great alternatives, and if we need to get back and listen to and learn, and you've provided some great resources, Jordan. Scott, you want to close us off, or I know we're coming to the hour here.
Yeah, we're about out of time. I think one of the things, for everyone that's listened to this, I think, and I've said this before, is just start learning. Like, just start learning. You don't wait till 1 second after to then go to the library and check out those books, right? Turn off your Netflix subscription, turn off your Disney Plus, turn off your Hulu, and go learn something, because you're going to retain it and as you practice it, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you do it. And that's the thing we're always trying to get people to do, is actually, okay, you've listened to an episode. Now, what are you going to do about it? Okay, so you've listened to Jordan and Paris and I talk. Now, if you've listened to both these episodes, it's almost 2 hours now. Now, what are you going to go do about it? Are you going to go get one of the books we've talked about? Are you going to go grow your own herbs? And I'm not talking your cooking herbs. I'm talking your medicinal herbs, right? Because you can go buy an herb garden, your food herb garden at any plant place. They have little kits. I'm talking like, do something about what you're learning, whether it's this topic or any other topic that we've discussed, or a topic that's been on your mind for a while. I want you to take today as the opportunity to go actually do something to learn about that thing that's been pressing on your mind, so that you can actually get better prepared. Because the difference between the prepared and the unprepared is action.
Excellent.
You have to take action. And so from what we've talked about today, go put down a pen and paper and put down your plan of action. Step 1, I'm going to blank. And I'm going to do this by doing these 3 things. Boom, boom, boom. Now set up a schedule and make sure you put your time into doing that, and reserve some time and get it going. I mean, for example, just post on our Facebook feed, foraging classes are happening tomorrow for some people, right? There's stuff, if you look at your local university annex programs, they've got stuff on gardening, they've got stuff on foraging. Like, there are so many different things in your area. Just go look for it and then go take a class, but do something. Don't just wait. Do something. And thank you for at least listening in and being part of the conversation tonight in our live. Those of you guys who have been here, fantastic content as usual. Appreciate you guys. But stay tuned, stay ready-minded, stay focused on the bigger picture. It's not just about surviving whatever could come. It's about thriving through whatever life throws at you. And that's what prepping is. Like, a lot of people think, oh, it's just for the apocalypse. No, come on, man. It's for everyday life. You never know what's going to happen. So I want to thank Jordan. Thank you so much for being here with us. If you guys want to stay in touch with Jordan, we talked about his website, and healthsaves.org. You can connect with them there. Thank you again, Jordan, for being here. Appreciate your time. And Paris, of course, thanks for being here every week.
Yes, thank you guys for having me on.
And with that, we'll call it a good night for everyone. Thank you for being here. Be safe out there. Be smart out there, and have a wonderful day.
Take care, guys.